Welcome back to the Bridgeton Beacon. I have the pleasure today of sitting down and having a conversation with Brittany Ingersoll, curator for the Cumberland County Historical Society. And Brittany's going to give us a little tidbit on some recent research that she has been doing. And so we anticipate this will be the first in a couple conversations we have to showcase and highlight all of the work that goes into many, if not all, of the research projects that she and the other curators do here at the Cumberland County Historical Society. So, Brittany, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for having me. I'll just let our listeners know we decided to meet today at the Gibbon House here in Greenwich. And this is a conversation we've wanted to have for a little while. And I'm really excited to speak with you today about an exciting research project which you've started and are still working on. So why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
So for several years, I wanted to do a queer oral history of Cumberland County. We have very, very, very little resources on anyone who is gay, lesbian, intersex, bisexual within our archives. And usually when people are not represented in our archives, people perceive it as those people did not exist, which just isn't true. Archive research has shown that, archives aren't constructed fluidly, that people make decisions about whose voices go in them or not. And so modernly, people are really working on making sure everyone is represented of the past within the archives. So I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I'm really excited that I have finally started to get the chance to be able to begin digging into this project.
And we had a conversation, you and I, a few months ago about this kind of overarching topic of what is history, what makes history. And you're right, if there hasn't been any reporting or recording of certain topics, it's as if it never existed, right? So, I had an opportunity to read a short piece that you wrote for, I guess it was the fall edition of the newsletter. Is that right?
Yes, which will be coming out in the next couple of weeks.
We'll try to put a link to that on the Bridgeton Beacon website. And you note that, there are at least a couple very, very well-known local historical individuals who had identified as queer at some point in their life, either then or later, one of whom is Sylvia Beach, who I think is a really interesting person. Can you tell us just a little bit about her specifically?
Yeah, so she is hugely known for her shop, her famous bookstore in Paris, Shakespeare and Company. So she had lived in Bridgeton very shortly. Her father was Sylvester Beach, and he was a reverend for one of the Presbyterian churches in Bridgeton. And so she is, we have very little information on her. We have a lot of biographies, but nothing that would be considered like primary source material straight linking her, any kind of linkage that tells the story from different records. So, but yes, she was a queer person that came from the area, and then later moved to Paris and started Shakespeare and Company.
And that bookstore, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't it publish Ulysses by James Joyce?
I believe so, yes. I think that's one of the big things that it's linked to.
Right. And there's another individual woman, Hampton, Brewster, that you speak about in this article. I'm not familiar with her. Can you tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, she actually came from Philadelphia. She was born and raised in Philadelphia. She's very, very known within like the library company in Philadelphia, which is an archives. They have like her picture up, and they house all of her records and archives in terms of her letters and everything. For a short time, she had a relationship with Charlotte Cushman, who was a famous actress at that time, and she had run-ins with her brother because he didn't like how she was behaving. She attempted to sue for her inheritance and unfortunately lost. She moved to Bridgeton and lived in Bridgeton for a while, taught French, music. I think she taught like outside of her house. I've not been able to link her to any school in the area. And then while she was living in Bridgeton, she had another relationship with another woman who stayed in Philly. And a lot of their correspondence she was constantly writing to her partner being like, can you buy me this? Can you buy me that? can you buy me this? All of those letters are housed, like I said, at LCP and then at Library Company in Philadelphia. And then once, after living in Bridgeton for a while, she moved to Italy and became a reporter, a correspondent, and she died in Italy. Yeah, so we don't have anything on her really. I've been able to kind of, besides the massive collection at the Library Company, I've been able to piece her life together with Bridgeton newspapers, which is how I find a lot of the people I end up researching.
So just to be clear, neither Sylvia Beach nor Ann Hampton Brewster were born in Bridgeton, but each of them lived in Bridgeton for what would be considered like a significant point in their life, such that Bridgeton area may have had an influence on what they ended up doing in the future. Would you agree with that? Or
I think Sylvia was born in the area, but I don't think she lived here very long. But yeah, Ann Hampton was an adult when she moved to Bridgeton, and she did live here for a while. But yeah, I agree. I think that she impacted in terms of like teaching and stuff like that.
I'm curious, in terms of conducting your research, how do you go about, like, what is your process when, as you've said, there's not a lot on either this topic in general or individuals in general for whatever reason? How do you start? What is it that you do such that you know that the end product is something that is reliable, that folks can read and appreciate?
So I usually create like a terms list. My background, my foundational like specialty is sex workers in the 19th century. So I have found a lot on women in Bridgeton. So that was really like my beginning on finding people who aren't well documented in the archives. So I usually create a term list and then go through a genealogy bank and with my terms, and then save any kind of newspapers and just keep going through them using these different terms. And then once I find like a name or like a group, in this instance with the queer oral history, then from there I start honing in on looking in onto those organizations or names. So instead of then I move from searching terms to just searching the names or the groups. So for this one, for example, for the Queer Oral History Project, I think the biggest hit I got was for like the terms gay and lesbian. And that's how I found the LGUC organization that formed in 1994. That same year became global.
And that was LGUC, is the Lesbians and Gays United for Cumberland County.
Yes. And that organization then that same year became global, which is Gay, Lesbians, or Bisexuals Alliance.
So I didn't realize that. So they are kind of one
I
of the
just
same.
figured it out yesterday when I was researching yesterday. Because so where I'm at in the project now, I've accumulated this massive amount of newspapers. And because it's an oral history project, I focused on more modern dates. So I did like 1975 to 1995. And then I have a large amount of newspaper articles, and now I'm going back and reading them and piecing them together.
What I think is so fascinating is, as you said, you started looking at these organizations, and I think there are a couple others that we can talk about. But as a result of kind of queuing in on global, you were able to find that they published monthly newsletters, which you were able to find a couple volumes of. So this is really like boots on the ground research. So describe for us what happened there and how you got these newsletters and how these newsletters are really, I would imagine, going to be crucial to the next steps.
Yeah. So once I figured out the organizations and everything, I looked into, I usually go to a library company in Philadelphia. It's usually like my niche because they have a lot of my era in terms of like 19th century.
And are they, do you go there in person, or do they have like a website that you can access?
Some of their records are online, but I do go in person.
Where's that located?
That is near...
I mean, it's in Philadelphia,
yeah,
city of Philadelphia?
Yeah. It's like on a PACO. Like you can take the PACO there.
Okay.
It's right next to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. So I from there, like I looked at some of their, because they have a lot of videos and research and stuff like that. So I was able to find other queer archives through their connection because they have a queer specialist archive at their place. And I've been to the William Way Community Center in Philadelphia before for talks. So I just reached out to them and seen if they had anything on these organizations or anything pertaining to Cumberland County, and they happen to have the two newsletters.
Volumes.
Yeah. So then I visited them and I took pictures and I spoke to the archivist and he checked other areas for me. But unfortunately, we couldn't find anything, but the search continues.
So these newsletters that you are reviewing are fairly relatively recent, right? From the 90s?
Yeah.
Are you able to thereafter maybe track down anyone who wrote the newsletters or who were mentioned in the newsletters? Is that a next step?
Yeah, so it's really weird because I'm so used to dealing with people who have passed on. So it's like there's this like space where all of these names of people have been posted in newspapers and newsletters, and I want to try to protect their identity, but also share the project. So one person who was heavily involved in the organization, I reached out to them, and sadly, due to the political state, they don't feel safe to share their story. But there's lots of other names that will be the next step. I'm going to start making a list of names and seeing if I can track them down. It's kind of weird because I call them and they're like, "How'd you find me?" And I'm like, "I just Googled
Remember
you."
that in the 90s?
Yeah. Which I imagine to an extent were private because if you wanted to go to, so LGUC and Global would share like dates of when they were meeting up, but where the location was, you had to either write to them or call them because they wanted to ensure safety. So all of the locations and meeting areas were private. So I'm curious. So I imagine in some capacity, these newsletters were also just meant for the organization themselves.
Right. So is there any, would you be comfortable like releasing or sharing those newsletters because of that? Or would that be something that you would, from like an ethical perspective in terms of how you do your research and how you decide what you're going to release? Talk to me about the interplay with that.
Yeah. So for the newsletters, I mean, they're open to the public for research, but knowing they exist isn't known.
How the place in Philadelphia obtained these?
No, but that's a great question. I should ask. But that's why when I shared the cover, you'll see the covers in our upcoming newsletter. Them not having names on them made me more comfortable. And even if you see when I shared the article, I blacked out the PO box and the phone number just in case. I don't want anyone. I imagine the number isn't even active or it belongs to someone else. I want to ensure that the people still remain safe. So if I were to share anything more of the newsletter, I'd have to talk to the archivist at William Way to make sure that that's okay. Because he said I could print these in our newsletter.
Newsletters were called Global, which is the acronym for the organization Gay, Lesbian, or Bisexual Alliance. Global News.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And they're great. They share, but I would be hesitant, for safety purposes in terms of releasing more information.
And you want to, it's like any news reporter, you want to be able to keep your sources private if they ask you to.
Yeah.
That's the only way you're going to get accurate information, certainly that you can then later corroborate in some fashion.
Yeah.
But you definitely have, it sounds like it's an uphill battle to some extent due just to the lack of information. I would suggest or think, though, that the good news is that you're conducting research that's fairly recent, right, compared to some of the things that you've researched. So it almost makes it that much more important. You want to grasp it before anybody who can share more about it has passed away.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Because one of the person I spoke to from it sounds so sketchy, just from when you're looking up information on someone alive in the news, they're in their 80s. So but then the newsletters are fantastic. They talk about pool parties and them hanging out. And one of them, they talk about how they went to New York and they participated in a pride parade in New York. And they're just being a little they were talking at one point where I guess there was cops involved. Like they had their own float in the thing. And they were making jokes about, oh, I wish they could pull me over, or stuff like that.
The newsletter.
Yeah. But what also is interesting in the newsletter is that they got funding from local companies as well. Like there's local businesses that are still around that had I'm assuming paid ads in the newsletters. And that's how they financially supported them.
Well, you have a clip in the article that looks like it's an advertisement in a local paper about an upcoming meeting. So it wasn't an underground organization, I would imagine.
No, just in terms of like location, but they posted regularly in the Bridgeton Evening News and the Millville News as well, because they met in Millville.
Okay, and so I would imagine that you're scouring the Bridgeton Evening News and any other local papers for any articles that mention the organization. And then you also talk about two other organizations that you're researching. E-Flag, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, as well as SJAA, South Jersey AIDS Alliance. Any additional research that you're able to share with us now about either of those organizations?
There was lots of crossovers between all of the organizations. So like one of the individuals two individuals who are heavily involved in the South Jersey AIDS Alliance were also involved in Global as well. And one of the people who was like one of the like co-heads of Global started PFLAG. So it was kind of like the same group of people that were running a lot of these organizations, and like they work together to help each other out. There was one article in one of the Global article or new letters where one of the people were upset at the turnout regarding support for South Jersey AIDS Alliance. So it was a lot of it. You could really see how LGUC created this community, which was the purpose of it. They wanted to create this organization so that the people within the queer community could come together, build their community, and really just have like a social outlets. So, and then it appears that they had the social outlet and then they worked in other groups that were more like supportive in different initiatives.
You started by saying that your ultimate goal really is an oral history.
Yes.
And you and I had a conversation the last time that we spoke on the Bridgeton Beacon about oral history and primary source material. And the Bridgeton Beacon is working on a project right now related to oral history. Can you just speak for a minute or two as a historian for our listeners and remind everyone, why is oral history so important?
I think oral history is kind of like getting ahead of the thing of like, for like research, like I always think, because my people like that I work with are always dead. It's like, but like primary source material that comes straight from their mouth.
Something that person witnessed, saw, heard, right?
Yeah, there's no chance because they've been passed for over 100 years. So history in general kind of gets ahead of that, where they now leave a proper documentation of their experiences through their perspectives that now we can use later for sources, and that can continue, and we can continue going back on and using to not just learn about that person's experience, but also what the world was like that they operated in and worked in and lived in. And that continues on. So we will continually have that until once they pass. So it really acts as this like additional level of primary source material.
I mean, it's almost more reliable than an article that someone might read that describes, a hearsay version of what may or may not have occurred. I'm an attorney, and so whenever you're in court and people are testifying, hearsay is not allowed. People are only allowed to testify and speak to the truth, and the truth is what that person saw, heard, felt at a given time. So I commend you. Are you seeking, is this a request for anyone who may have been involved in any of these organizations or others that we may not have known about that wants to either A, come forward and share with you privately what they know, or B, provide an oral history about those topics?
Yes, please. If you have been involved, and we've also shared the information of wanting, if you are interested, on social media and our website and now on the new newsletter. If you want to share your story verbally, if you want to write it down and you want to share it in written form, or if you just want to talk to me, yes, please do. And I know, as I move forward, the people who are involved in these, I know they're aging. And if no one's interested in coming forward. And I understand because it is very scary right now. At least now there's this research that exists within our archives. And now we know these groups existed. But the long-term goal would be to to talk to the people, to learn about their experiences in the area, and to be able to preserve that in the archives so that when researchers come in, we can be like, yes, queer people have always existed and they existed in the county, and we have all this documentation to prove it.
Right. Thank you very much, Brittany, for speaking with me today.
Thank you so much for having
I'd like
me.
to stay in touch, obviously, and use this platform as a way to document what you're doing, what you're learning, and how you're going about it. It's really fascinating, and I commend you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Have a great day.